is on the Gold Coast in Queensland. Hi, Julie. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay? 'Cause
I
I'm
can hear
outside
you
and it's a little
fine.
bit windy. Yeah, that's okay.
What's your thought here?
Yeah. I just wanted to make a comment, and you mentioned about American history. I have worked with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families for many years, and I think we tend to forget sometimes, how close that it was not that long ago. I'm in my 60s, and it was certainly in my lifetime, where children were taken away from families. Families were forced to be on missions and get rations for food that was very unhealthy, white flour, milk powder, barely fruit and veggies, barely meat. Then when they got 16, they had to go and work in households as servants or on stations, and they were charged exorbitant rent to be there for their keep. They worked 7 days a week with no holidays, and the government promised that they would be keeping their wage for them so that when they finished, they would have some income. And, many of us are aware of the stolen wages, and they actually got nothing. And my dad didn't find out till later in life with his Aboriginal heritage, just because in the town where he grew up, if you're Aboriginal, you couldn't swim in the bull bars. You couldn't, if you're a woman, couldn't try on clothes in town, men or women. You had to live on the fringes of town and not come into town.
Julie, you're making some really very, very good points here. And I think you're probably accurately assessing a lot of things that happened that were dreadful in our own Australian history. When you talk about the missions that were established and that there were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children who were sent to those, I sometimes take that back a step further and say that one of the reasons why there were so many Christian missions that were established in some of these communities is to provide sanctuary for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people because they were under dreadful threat for their own lives. And one of the things that really characterises the history of the Australian Christian Church, and while there are all sorts of critics who say we did not do enough, one of the reasons for those missions being established in those places where they were is to provide a sanctuary, because the Christians were the only ones who believed that the black man and the white man, being created in the image and likeness of God, had a essential equality. Now, I'll bring John Mackay into this part of the conversation here. John, your thoughts for Julie as she's sharing those things?
Having done several documentaries on the origin of the races, and if folks want it, go to Creation Research, look up streaming or look up MP4s or look up DVDs. There's still some DVDs that are really out there, and you can get Origin of Races, History of Man. And because we did that all over the planet, we had to investigate even issues like this. So I interviewed quite a few Aboriginals, and one of them was very insightful. And I asked him, what about the stolen generation? And he just shook his head and he said, it wasn't like you've been told. I said, what do you mean? He said, they never took us from our parents. Where we were, they came and they asked our parents, did we want our children to get an education? And I thought, wow. I'm not even brave enough to film this. This is so provocative. And I said, did they take anybody away? And he said, no, you had a choice of whether you wanted to go or not. And I thought, now that's something I've never read in a textbook, but here it is, a full-blooded Aboriginal man telling me this face to face. And he said, the one thing we are grateful for, whatever else happened that's wrong, you brought the gospel. You see, if you have well-fed Aborigines who are wealthy, there's no better than well-fed Europeans who are wealthy. They're both on their way to hell without the gospel. Now, let's put it in context. Go back to the coming of Australia to the convicts. Now, if you want to see mistreatment, have a look at the convicts. No wages, no holidays. It's no different, right, to what's being claimed here. And yet you don't read of the convicts' descendants claiming mistreat, stolen generations or whatever. And many of them were effective. They came here because they stole a loaf of bread because they were hungry, right? So there's your context, your background. But out of that came people like this Aboriginal man, a lovely, godly Christian man. I even in the end preached in his church, and I still preach in Aboriginal churches because God has given me an understanding that's way beyond. The real issue here is not land rights. The real issue is, are you right with Jesus Christ? Now get that one sorted and you find the others become of less significance and more importance in putting the nation back together again. And that's what we need, because the people who are pushing so much of this wokeism tend to justify it on the basis of racism and say racism caused this. No, it didn't cause it at all. Sin caused it, right? And sin causes wokeism because you actually miss the point that God is in control and you can't do anything. The motive you even see on Christian buses, in a world where you can be anything you like, be kind. Well, sorry, it's not a world you can be anything like. It's a world where the Lord's Prayer says, your will be done. You can only be what God wants, and you won't make anybody happy, black or white, until you take that message to them to get right, first of all, with the one who really is the traditional owner of the land.